Despite not being the top 10 matchup that we thought it would have been 3 weeks ago, this game would have lived up to the hype if it was, because this game was close, and it was not over until Ohio State kicked a field goal to make it a 9-point game. This game was far closer than I anticipated. I predicted this to, in fact, be a blowout. Like, seriously, I predicted this to be a blowout. So, yeah, and it was anything but. Penn State came out and actually scored first and led into the second quarter. So, that was that. After exchanging 2 fumbles on both teams' opening drives, and Penn State forced Ohio State to punt, Penn State, they took command for a quarter. Ohio State, of course, their talent and their coaching outdoes Penn State. And by the second quarter, it was 17-10, Ohio State at the half. Penn State tied it once more, and then Ohio State, by way of a field goal and a touchdown, made it 27-17. Penn State's last touchdown brought them within 3, and then Noah Ruggles kicked 2 field goals in the fourth quarter to make it 33-24. Clifford threw a pick, which effectively, ended the game, and it was 33-24. Ohio State was the final. C.J. Stroud threw for 305 yards, 1 touchdown, completed 22 out of his 34 attempted passes. Sean Clifford had 35 completions to 52 passing attempts, threw for 361 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. What's interesting is Penn State's leading rusher, Lovett, had 13 carries for 20 yards. Penn State, in fact, only rushed for 33 total yards, and we'll get to how, despite being pretty one-dimensional, Penn State was still able to keep this a game. Talk about that later on in my takeaways. Trevion Henderson, of course, still doing what he does. He rushed for just over 5 yards a carry. He had 28 carries for 152 yards and a touchdown. And Jackson Smith-Njigba led the Buckeyes in receiving yards. And this game was it was interesting. Like, this was actually a game, and I expected it to be a game where by halftime I was going to be bored out of my mind, and Ohio State was going to lead 35-3 or maybe 35-7 or 10, and it wasn't that. It was competitive. Penn State did turn over the ball 3 times, one of which was returned for a touchdown. However, despite those 3 turnovers, Penn State still made it a game. Ohio State's 1 turnover, Penn State didn't do anything with. They fumbled on the next drive. Ohio State only outgained Penn State by 70 yards. Penn State had 5 more first downs. It's because Ohio State made some big plays, while Penn State mainly just took chunks and chunks away at Ohio State. Instead of, trying to go verticals or go for the Hail Mary, they just took chunks and chunks away to slowly drive down the field and to end up, doing something about it. And in the end, that wasn't enough, and Ohio State's talent and skill came through for a victory. So now, with all that being said, let us get to my takeaways. So my takeaways here are the defensive line stepped up in a big way. In a big, big way. That fumble recovery for a touchdown by Jerron Cage, 57-yarder, that dude was big. That was a big boy returning that ball to the end zone. I mean, that's every defensive lineman's dream. What an opportunity for Cage here. And that is going to be a memory he has for the rest of his life. You also sacked Clifford 4 times. I think you had 5 QB pressures, 8 tackles for loss. You defended the run well, and when the secondary didn't let you down, you pressured Clifford well, you sacked him, you forced a fumble from him. Really, you dominated the line of scrimmage. from a defensive line standpoint, and it was good. I mean, you should be proud of your defensive line for performing the way that they did against the Nittany Lions. Another positive, too, is that this whole team, like Jackson Smith and Jigba and Henderson and Stroud leading in their respective, stat lines, passing yards, receiving yards, rushing yards. Those are guys who weren't starters last year. So this team, the younger guys are stepping up along with last year's starters. And that is very important to have a team that can win the playoff and that can win the national title, that can win the Big Ten. That is a very important thing. Cohesion, discipline, everything. I mean, if your team was anything like my Michigan Wolverines, you would have lost last night because Penn State wanted that game. I might even be able to say that Penn State wanted that game more than your team did. I mean, Penn State played their hearts out. That was the best game Penn State might have played all season long. It wasn't enough. It was not enough against the Buckeyes, despite some of the self-inflicted mistakes the Buckeyes had. It wasn't enough because you've trained your team that well, you've recruited that well, and yeah, it's just all there is to say. And your road to the playoff, with Michigan losing yesterday, with Iowa had, for lack of a better term, just was stomped into the ground by Wisconsin. Paul Chryst just said, who cares? We have a better defense than they do. And without turnovers, we can win. So let's just only let Mertz throw like 20 times. Mertz actually had a passing touchdown. Guy had a passing touchdown on Iowa. And guess what? No picks. So that just proves how overrated Iowa was, and I was a part of the group that thought they were truly a possible playoff contender. But anyway, moving on from that. Ohio State, you only have really Michigan State left. I'm not going to count Michigan. I think the way we lost to Michigan State shows that there is no way that we are beating you. None. I have no faith. Now, you gave me a different coach. You gave me Pat Fitzgerald or Paul Chryst just for that one game. Might be a different story. I think Aiden Hutchinson, David Ojabo, Cade McNamara, J.J. McCarthy, Andrell Anthony. I think a lot of our players have fire and discipline like never before. But if your coach is not as passionate or as well executed or as adaptive as your players are, he's limiting his own players, and that is what Jim Harbaugh is. So you're beating Michigan. If we beat you, oh cool, you have some other issues you need to work at. Michigan State's a different story. Now, Michigan State, here's the thing. You don't have to travel there. They have to come to what was a very intimidating place last night. Very intimidating. They have to travel to your house. And they have to know that, Cade and Michigan have never passed for 400 yards in a game this season. And they just passed for 400 on MSU. They know that the whole world knows if you run an air raid against Michigan State, you have a chance to win. And guess what Ohio State can do? Ohio State and CJ Stroud have passed for amazing, legendary numbers all throughout the year. We talked about this a while ago, that Ohio State could have 3 1,000-yard receivers by the end of the season. Michigan State's corners and safeties and any guy who was a part of coverage could not keep up with Michigan's wide receivers. Imagine how far behind they are going to be to your wide receivers. Your only concern with MSU is MSU runs a bend but not break defense, and I made fun of it in my rant. However, despite what I don't think it'll work against you, but your red zone sputters, do not get arrogant and think that they won't capitalize off of your sputters. Michigan State capitalizes off of mistakes. Mel Tucker, unlike Harbaugh, unlike Franklin, will not give a game up, will not cave into their holes and call stupid games. Mel won't do that. But anyway, you have the benefit of hosting the only undefeated team in the Big Ten. You largely outdo them at nearly every position besides maybe running back, and that's even a debate. So, yeah, your road is set for success. Now on to some of the concerns. The offense, again, the sputtering. Penn State is the second defense of the season you have faced that actually has a pulse. The other one was Oregon, and you lost to Oregon. Oregon is now a team that, as we all know, if they win out, despite the fact I don't think they deserve it, is possibly in contention for the first Pac-12 playoff berth since 2016. Penn State is a 5-3 football team. A 5-3 football team with a pulse can now pull close to Ohio State. And granted, if the red zone execution was better, if Stroud hit the pass on the fourth down, it would be viewed differently. But hypotheticals don't exist. I, as a Michigan fan, there were several scenarios in which, for example, if Thorne's fumble was ruled a touchdown, the outcome of the game might have been set in stone. It wasn't, though. Hypotheticals don't matter. They're fun to talk about. They might matter in future situations, just seeing how teams could be, because sometimes the play call is perfect, the execution isn't, or vice versa. This game, though, it's all set in stone. You sputtered in the red zone, and on several other opportunities too often. Penn State is not a great football team. They played like one tonight. They did not play like an elite one, though. So from a playoff standpoint, this is not good news. From a Big Ten standpoint, you don't really even care. If all you want to do is win the Big Ten, this concern is like not even a concern. Because I don't think with just how consistent your staff is, you have a great defensive line, even sputtering in the red zone, you still scored 33 points and severely limited Penn State. It's not much of a concern. It might be, but at the same time, it's Ohio State. And the offense overall did well. I mean, they gained 466 yards. They only turned it over once. Stroud threw for over 300 yards. And he had some questionable throws, but he still had a good game and a game that put you in a position to win. And finally, the last takeaway. The last takeaway is the defense did not do well against the passing game. Penn State, you look at the stats, looked like they ran an air raid. The stats tell you it without, the amount of pass attempts and rush attempts. The stats from Penn State tell you that Ohio State faced Mike Leach. And granted, Mike Yurcich has ran an air raid offense before. And it's kind of similar. Penn State is a more similar offense to an air raid than they have in the past. But regardless, Penn State only ran for 33 total yards all game. And they had 29 attempts. That's a little over 3 feet per rushing attempt. That's stupid. So basically, as someone who's 6'2", Penn State runs like diving for extra yards 2 times. They gain 1 of me on the field. That is horrible. Ohio State had more rushing attempts than Penn State did yards. That is stupid. If you're a Penn State fan, I don't even know what Franklin does. I don't know what Franklin does. I don't even know what Penn State's O-line does when you have to run the football. It's asinine. No team who has the talent Penn State does should rush for only 33 yards a game. That makes me want to regurgitate, is what that stat makes me want to do. But anyway, enough. You faced that. You knew that Penn State is one of the most inept teams nationally when it comes to running the football. They can't run the football. You still let Clifford pass for 361 on you and a touchdown. And in the end, yes, you picked him off. In the end, you forced a strip sack. He turned it over twice. gave up a whole touchdown within a turnover. And yeah, but regardless, in the future, this is kind of looking more ahead to the playoff, but even take Michigan and Michigan State. Michigan and Michigan State are both better at running the football than Penn State is by massive margins. Massive margins. They are far better. Penn State and Michigan will put up more than 100 yards or around 100 yards on your defense. They just will. I mean, Kenneth Walker is amazing, and Michigan has a good enough O-line, a great enough O-line, and good enough of running backs to do that to most teams. And as proven against, just average secondaries, Michigan State and Michigan can get off big plays. So what I'm saying is, you did win this game. So there's only a limited amount of concern. You can't complain. But in the future, beware. You can't play like this for the rest of the year and expect to win the playoff, expect to win a single playoff game, and maybe even expect to make the playoff, depending on how Michigan State capitalizes off of mistakes, or depending on, this won't happen, but the world should help you if it does. Oh boy, if that happens to Michigan, that'll be a different conversation, though, if it even gets to that point. Anyway, Ohio State, just to kind of finish this off, is still the team to beat in the Big Ten East. You guys are by far, the best team in the Big Ten. Wisconsin's probably going to win the West. That'll be a good matchup against you guys. Their stiff defense and stiff defenses have shown they can hold you guys to under 40 points. And their O-line and even their whole offense slowly improving. That'll be an interesting matchup, but a likely win for Ohio State. I don't see how anyone on your future schedule beats you. Ryan Day will take this game and learn from it. That is what he will do. That's what he's always done. He learned from the Oregon game. He learned from the loss to Clemson in his first year, and it led to him blowing Clemson out of the water, potentially breaking them for all time, seeing how Clemson almost lost at home to Florida State. Ryan Day can adapt. His offense and defense can adapt. Putting Matt Barnes, who I don't think ever called plays, boldly putting him in DC and him doing better than Coombs is what a move. It just shows the adaptiveness and readiness and eliteness of this staff thus far. That's all I have to say in this video. If you liked it, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. What did you think of this game? Do you, as Ohio State or non-Ohio State fans, think that Ohio State has a chance at the national title? Or do you think you might have to settle for just playing in Indy? Tell me what you think below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you around.